Yep, that's me. You're probably wondering how I ended up in this situation.
All right, start this one. Yes, that's it. Yep.
Today we're going to fix Yamaha's defective oil cooler. Let's get started. Before we dig in, here's a little background on the defect. 2010 was the first year these new engines were introduced into the Yamaha Jetboat. The oil coolers that were used were poorly designed. They used the same bolt to pair both halves of the oil cooler together. You can see here that this bolt cannot withstand the pressure from the engine. Mid-2011, they've changed this bolt to a bigger one and still continue to this day to use that design. In fact, if you want to change the oil cooler for your 2010 boat, the part number is exactly the same as the new design that they use today.
So in my infinite wisdom, I thought it'd be a great idea to work on them while they were still attached to the engine. I first tried a bolt extractor, and as you can see, it does not work. Yeah, that's broken and stuck in there.
Well, that didn't go entirely as planned, so it looks like I'm gonna need 2 new oil coolers to install. Let me go order those real quick. New oil cooler, this is the one with the updated bolt, but before we put this in, we're gonna have to take out the oil and remove the oil filter.
Wait, we have to do the sweet unboxing first. Man, that's shiny. And because anything could go wrong, we have replacement bolts to attach the coolers to the engine. We also have a replacement pack of O-rings. And our journey begins as if we were doing a regular oil change. Take the oil extraction tube and put it down the dipstick pipe. Once you've waited approximately an eternity and a half, go ahead and remove the oil filter. Now we finally come to the meat and potatoes of this project. Grab a set of pliers, squeeze the hose clamp, and slide it up out of the way. If it's stubborn and won't come loose, use a flat-bladed screwdriver to help break it apart. Now go ahead and grab your favorite 12mm socket. You're going to remove the bolts at these 3 locations on the oil cooler. Once you have all 3 bolts out, pull gently on the oil cooler to reveal 2 sleeves that connect the oil cooler to the engine. Now that the oil cooler is separated from the engine, you can work on removing the 2 hoses on the back. This was a little difficult, and I didn't figure out until afterward, it's actually easier if you can get a pair of vice grips to actually clamp on the hose clamp. It'll keep it locked as you can slide it out of the way. You'll be doing this mostly blind. Again, if the hoses are stubborn and they won't come off, use a flat-bladed screwdriver to help pry it apart. Great, now that it's out, take a rag and clean up some of that old oil.
Out with the old, in with the new.
I still can't believe the pressure from these oil coolers sheared the heads of these bolts clean off. These are the sleeves that connected the oil cooler to the engine block. We ordered new O-rings and we're going to swap them out now because we don't want these to fail in the future. If you're having a hard time rolling them off, try using a paper towel for better grip. Before we put the new O-rings on, we want to make sure the slots in the sleeve are nice and clean. So take a rag and wipe down all the grit and grime that's stuck to it. Now take your Yamalube marine grease and just put a little bit in the crevices, spread it around with your finger, and pop the O-ring right back in. Make sure you put some grease on the outside of the O-ring so that when you pop it in here, it'll just slide right in. Okay, now let's lower our new oil cooler down into the engine bay. The first thing you're going to do is going to take those two hoses and push them back onto those connectors on the back. Grab your vice grips, clamp down those hose clamps and slide them back into place. These clamps are really hard to see from the angle you're working with. You're probably going to be doing this all on feel. So once you have your clamp slid into position, use your fingers to feel the distance between the clamp and the oil cooler. Okay, this is very important. You need thread sealant here. Not Loctite blue, not Loctite red. Thread sealant. The thread sealant will prevent these bolts from locking up. We do not want a situation where these bolts seize to the block. If you ever had to remove it, you're going to have way bigger headaches. Add a little grease to the O-rings here as well, so that this way it lubricates them and the oil cooler will slide right onto them. Now there were 3 different size bolts when we pulled them out. The shorter one is going to go in this location, and the longer ones are going to go in the other 2 spots on the bottom. Start off obviously by hand, and then we'll transition to a wrench. Carefully snug these down to barely hand tight. You'll finish all 3 bolts off with a torque wrench set to 13.5 foot-pounds of torque. All right, we are on the home stretch. Reconnect that top hose, slide the hose clamp back on. Take a little motor oil and coat the threads of the oil filter threaded bolt. You will remove this from the old oil cooler using an 11mm hex wrench. This oil filter bolt also gets torqued down to 13.5 foot-pounds of torque. Rub a little motor oil on the oil filter's gasket and then really hand tighten it back onto the oil cooler.
A good way to double check that your hoses and hose clamps are on properly is to take a picture or video with your cell phone. Then you'll be able to see and double check that they're on properly. Alright, that actually went relatively well. I'm going to get ready to start the other side now. Need to remove this hose. You're next.
I'm not going to make you guys watch that all over again. It's the exact same process for the other side. Just don't forget to replace the drain hose. And remember, the most crucial part of this whole thing, replace the 4 quarts of Yamalube in the engine. Now that's exactly what I wanted to see. No oil.
And we're all done. The first engine only took about an hour to do by the time I figured out everything, and the second engine only took about a half hour. The hardest part was probably the hose clamps. The low torque and the thread sealer on the bolts made them really easy to come out. Hopefully that'll fix all our issues and we can continue sailing through the summer. If you guys like this video, give a thumbs up, leave a comment down below if there's anything else that you want to see, and don't forget to subscribe. Thanks everyone, and I'll see you all on the water.